but this is the Gemara's question. Nafkamine, the difference, the reason is important is deba'e lemetav le, is that he ba'e, need, ask, want, right? But here, something lemetav, to give, right? Ba'e here, he needs to give him the sa'ar and boshet of each one. Now, I mean, he needs to give him the, right? Well, that's the question, really. Does he need to give him the sa'ar and boshet of each one? Meaning, the difference between this and this seems to be that if we do chad umdana, just one umdana at the very end, I'm not going to end up giving him the tsa'ar and boshet for each individual attack. Whereas if I do this option, chada amdinan, then he will end up paying for the tsa'ar and boshet of each one. Now, why is that? We will talk about it. But, so, we've asked our question, our two options, and here's the difference. The difference is not, notice, nezek, ripui, or shevet, where the Gemara has already told you here that there's no difference between doing it in chad umdina versus doing it chada amdinan, one by one, in terms of nezek, ripui, and shevet. The only difference is with regard to tsa'ar and boshet. Now, what happens next? Nehi de nezek, ripui, v'shevet. These are the three that, where there's no practical nafka mina, right? That's why it's the meaning of granted that, or it's understood that, right? It's a given that nezek, ripui, and shevet, the kol chada v'chada lo yahavinan le. You don't need to separate out those three into separate units. Why? The kevan de keyahiv le demei kule. Since he gives him demei kule, the money for all of him. Now, you know that that phrase refers specifically to nezek. Okay? Once I'm paying you full nezek to cover the entirety of your original salary, there's no more room for shevet. And to say, I'm going to go from 100 to 60 to 40 to 20 to 0 is no different than going from 100 straight to 0. So for those, it doesn't make a difference. Because he's kiman de katle dami. It's like you killed him. In other words, you completely ended his work capability. V'haya hayivle de mekule. You pay the whole thing. Taru boshet mihat. However, the kol chada v'chada yahiv, he could, and why I'm putting the conditional here? I'm putting the conditional here the same way as I did above, is that we're not stating that he must give the tsar and boshet of each one. We are asking the question, if we didn't manage to do Omdin in between the attacks, do we have to go back and kind of redo each umdana or not? And the difference is that if we do go back and do each separate umdana, then I will end up paying separate Sa'ar and Boshet for each episode, because Deha Havale Tara Boshet. He in fact had experienced separate Sa'ar and Boshet each time. Right? So it would make sense to say that Sa'ar and Boshet, there should be Sa'ar and Boshet for each one and not kind of grouped all together, because unlike Nezek, which is sort of all one pot, Tar and Boshet are separate experiences. Now, you should have your eye at this moment on one particular thing that we haven't accounted for, which is Ripui. Because this reasoning, Kevandake Yahi Ledame Kule, Kamandakat Ledame, accounts for why there's no need to calculate Nezek and Shevet individually in separate units. And this statement explains why we might at least think that you should calculate separately the Tar and Boshet of each of the individual incidents. But this statement doesn't, but even though Ripui shows up in this little list right here, Ripui is not explained here. That's a problem that the Rishonim get very confused about and have a great deal to say about. A great deal to say, which we will encounter as we go along.